Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Applying to Grad School in the New Normal with UVA Alumni Career Services. I'm Amanda Panarese, Director of Alumni Services with the Alumni Association, and I'm joined by my colleague and fellow career advisor, Liz, to provide some insight on how to navigate the grad school application process. We'll have Q&A at the end of the presentation, so feel free to type your question at any time into the chat box. We'll be monitoring that at the end of the presentation. And also, if you can keep yourself muted during the presentation, that will be an immense help, so we appreciate that. But otherwise, thank you for joining us, and we're excited to get started. Liz?
Great, thanks, Amanda. So to start, we wanted to provide some context about where we are now in the employment landscape. The coronavirus has had a catastrophic effect on the workforce and job market. CNN reported this morning that there were just under 5.1 million cases in the US. And according to the US Department of Labor, in a report that was issued on August 6th, the unemployment rate is estimated at 11%, with over 16 million unemployment claims filed through July 25th. 2020 grads have been hit especially hard, with many job or internship offers being rescinded. More broadly, job losses are occurring due to reductions in force and furloughs as companies fight to remain in business, and many businesses have had to close altogether. Some companies that have remained afloat are still experiencing hiring freezes. Overall, there are fewer jobs available right now, and the market is very competitive. As a result, because employment opportunities are more limited now, many new and recent grads are turning toward grad school. Grad school applications do tend to go up during economic downturns. Between 2006 and 2011, during the Great Recession, college enrollment grew by 3 million, according to a US Census Bureau report. Some applicants plan to enroll anyway, but others are enrolling earlier than expected, or as a strategy for postponing the job search until the crisis has ended. Amanda?
Thanks. Sorry, I had a little hang up trying to unmute myself there. So given all of those statistics and the current situation that we all find ourselves in, we're going to cover the impact that this has had on grad school applications and just some considerations to have when you're considering whether you should still apply. So these effects are fairly straightforward. Given the way things went in the spring, application timelines were affected. There was uncertainty on behalf of applicants about whether they wanted to apply to a program that might start online versus in person. There were effects on entrance exams and timing. If you were coming straight out of undergrad, you may have been concerned if you were given pass-fail grades in your second semester versus letter grades. And the biggest one is the last one, which is the only constant was change. Admissions requirements were changing in a very short time, almost weekly or daily, depending on what kind of grad program it was. My personal expertise is around business school and business school applications, so you'll probably hear more from me about that. But all graduate programs were affected this spring. So in terms of trends that we're seeing, many programs, Liz, I'm sorry, do you mind advancing that? Thank you so much. Sorry about that. We're having some technical things. But as you can see here, this is a sample of the changes that we've seen in grad school admissions. So we had programs either eliminating or providing waivers for the GMAT or the GRE. We saw rolling deadlines instead of set deadlines. Round 3 in the business school application process, the spring was the most active it's ever been. We had schools, including Darden, extending their round 3 deadlines into July. But the number one trend we will most likely see, which we see every time there's a down economy, is that when there are fewer jobs, there are more grad school applicants. So the applicant pool across MBA, law, and other graduate programs, including PhD programs, is going to be more competitive than ever because there will be more applicants than usual. So we can't predict if these accommodations will be made for the fall round in terms of application processes. We can't predict if there will continue to be waivers. I can make a small crystal ball prediction, we'll see if I'm right, that in the fall, I believe programs will potentially stop waiving entrance exams, especially because the GMAT, the GRE, and the LSAT have all moved to online formats. So I could see, especially business schools, requiring the GMAT and the GRE again. I'm actually seeing that with a couple of my clients that I'm working with who are applying to programs in the fall.
Okay, thank you. So now we've discussed some of the changes that we're seeing in the landscape, and we want to go ahead and begin discussing how to start your application process. So this slide is focusing on determining your reasons for applying along with your selection criteria. People tend to apply to grad school for a variety of reasons. Improving their career prospects can include commanding a higher salary or a position with greater responsibility or authority, having more interesting or more challenging work, or possibly to help you prepare to progress further in your career or to progress more quickly. Academic growth is another reason for applying. Some individuals may be working in academia where graduate degrees are the norm. They may be pursuing a tenure track position, or perhaps they're interested in deepening their knowledge and expertise. Graduate degrees are also standard requirements for some jobs, so law, medicine, counseling, and many others. In these cases, these degrees are going to be required in order to be considered for employment. And some people pursue graduate school to delay the job search. Although this approach might work if the person already has a clear idea of what they want to do and some of the requisite experience, it's not recommended as a strategy for figuring out what you want to do next. Grad school is intended to be a deeper study in your field, and the expectation is that you will be very focused on your direction once you apply. So once you've made the decision to apply, it's important to begin to narrow down your criteria for the type of program you want to pursue, the schools you want to apply to, and the school at which you ultimately will accept admission. Everyone's criteria and priorities are different, but we recommend considering certain specific criteria for you to be able to evaluate overall which programs are going to be the best fit for you. The academic programs and faculty can be very important, particularly in areas that require a high degree of specialization, such as research or engineering, and/or if you're going into academia. In some cases, the rankings also matter a great deal, law or MBA school, for instance, but it's largely going to depend on your field and how you plan to use the degree after graduation. It's also important to consider a program's accreditation, no matter what the field, as this can affect certifications and even hireability. So you want to make sure that you're choosing schools that are accredited. Cost can also be a concern for many applicants, and some programs offer financial aid or work study opportunities, and other programs may be available part-time for those students who want to be able to continue working. Location can be important both personally or professionally, and this can also connect to recruiting relationships and career outcomes, and where you want to work after graduation, as some schools tend to feed into specific geographic regions, and some employers only recruit at certain schools. So again, this varies according to the type of program, but it is an important and often overlooked criteria in school selection, as it can be disastrous to find out too late that your dream employer does not recruit from your program. Student and faculty ratio is another consideration, particularly if you prefer to have smaller classes. And then there are other factors too, such as culture or urban versus rural campuses. So it's important to consider all of the factors that are important to you as you're beginning to evaluate options and narrow things down. Okay, Amanda?
Thank you. So getting into the meat of the process, this is truly the very first step I would recommend taking when considering whether to go to grad school. You really need to think about your long-term career goals and how a master's degree is going to get you there. As Liz mentioned, grad school programs are designed to equip you with specific skills and knowledge that you will need to pursue these long-term goals. So you can't successfully choose a grad program if your goals aren't at least somewhat defined. So as mentioned here, grad programs aren't like undergrad. They are typically on a shorter time frame, so there's less time for broad exploration. So that's why you need to come in with a bit of focus. Once you've gotten a point of view about where you want to go, then you can figure out how to get there. So then you want to research the education and skills that you'll need to get into a particular industry or role. You want to talk to people who are in that field to see what they pursued. What type of degree did they get? Did they feel like it was worth it? Did they feel like that degree helped them get where they are now? And then you want to work backward from the to determine which degree is right for you. So often with clients, I sometimes end up having conversations where they're determined to get an MBA, and actually, once we talk about their career goals, a master's in data science might be more applicable than a full-on MBA program. So it's really important to start to think about what your priorities are. Now, do you need to know exactly what you want to do down to your day-to-day tasks and the role and the exact company? No, you really don't. But it's important to have a focused point of view because you are going to be expressing that point of view and those goals and those expectations you have for yourself in your applications when you're applying to programs.
Okay, so once you've made the decision to apply and you're clear on your reason, it's time to get started on your application process. So we've talked a little bit already about school selection. Once you've selected the type of program and evaluated your criteria, you should be ready to begin making a list of schools. So we're often asked how many schools you should apply to, and it really depends on your situation and goals and what's customary for your program. Some clients we've worked with have applied to only one school and others applied to 10 or more. So it's really a very personal and situational decision based on the criteria that are important to you and also what's customary in your field. You also want to make sure that you're tracking your timeline and that you allow plenty of time to get all of the components of your application together. For fall or late fall application deadlines, starting the process in the summer typically works well. You generally want to have several months lead time to prepare. Some programs are going to have rolling admission and others have standard deadlines. And other programs may also offer more than one enrollment period per year. There may be a fall and a spring admission period, for instance. So you'll need to know what is the case for your program and your target schools. And along with that, you also want to develop some kind of spreadsheet or tracking system to keep track of all of your deadlines, your requirements, and other loose ends for all of the programs that you're applying to. As even within the same type of program, some of these things may vary according to school. And then, as Amanda mentioned earlier, some programs are waiving entrance exams and some aren't. So you'll need to know what's happening for your program type in your schools and what you're planning to do and plan accordingly. So you ideally want to allow enough time to prepare, take, and then retake the entrance exams. You may not need to retake them, but it's good to have that time built in. Keep in mind also that if you're a contributing member of the Alumni Association, there is a 10% discount with Kaplan if you need to do test prep. And then in addition to the entrance exams, schools also consider your undergraduate GPA, your transcripts, letters of recommendation, and your personal statement. There may also be supplemental essays. So you want to make sure that you allow plenty of time to get these materials together and to write a draft and write an updated draft of all of the essays. Some programs are going to collect everything through a central credentialing service, and other programs you would be submitting everything directly to the school. And then a quick note on the GPA. So once you've graduated, you really won't be able to change your GPA, but if it's on the lower end of the curve, it's important that the rest of your application be as strong as possible. So if you have strong entrance exam scores, a compelling personal statement and letters of recommendation, and a clear sense of purpose, that may be able to help. And then if you're pursuing a career in healthcare, a post-bac program might also be an option to take courses that you didn't get in your curriculum as an undergrad, or possibly to boost your academic performance in those areas if needed. And so now you'll be ready to begin making the list of schools that you plan to apply to, schools that have programs in your field. There are some databases to help you find accredited programs, and we have some of these on our website. You can also do some simple internet searches according to the type of program that you're looking for and any other specifications, like if you're looking in Virginia, for instance. You'll be able to view your list of schools through the lens of the criteria that you've established to help you narrow down the list. And then if you have any questions, maybe about your undergraduate career, GPA or scores, or questions about the program in general, you can reach out to the admissions offices for assistance. Normally, we would also suggest visiting the campuses if possible, but that may not or probably won't be an option right now. Some programs are offering virtual sessions or open houses, so those can be really helpful as they give you an opportunity to learn more about the programs and engage with administrators and admissions personnel, and also to ask questions. And it can help signal your interest in a particular program if you're participating in these. So Amanda?
Thanks, Liz. So now we're going to get into the applying part of it, right? So let's go over some of the general things that almost all grad programs seek in an applicant. We're going to, there we go, we're going to pull up a couple of things that they look for, and I'm sure this is not surprising to anyone, but I'm gonna call out that second bullet again because it's my favorite. So again, a clear purpose, and articulating a clear purpose. So as I like to tell my clients, even if you're feeling a little unsure about which area you want to go into, but you have two that are top of mind for you, pick one and have that be your focus for the purpose of the application. You can almost always change your focus, especially in an MBA program, once you get in, but having a clear point of view is really important. And you want to be able to thoughtfully communicate why you're a good fit for the program. Thinking about the compelling personal statement and the overall story. Again, a number of business schools require more essays. They tend to have more, but they're shorter. Or even other grad school programs, I've worked with clients who are going into public policy programs, or the sciences are still requiring more than one essay. So you want to help the admissions committee know what's strong about you, what's different about you, because they're trying to craft an overall class that's going to be successful. So they need to be able to picture how you will contribute to the program and community as a student in the classroom and out, and then as an alum. So what qualities are you going to highlight in your application to help you stand out? So that can be reflected through relevant experience, that can be reflected through leadership, but you want to make sure that you're pulling some key themes about yourself throughout your application. So as for some tips and tricks, start early. That's the number one. It's very important. And again, figuring out your purpose is huge. And that's part of the start early, because then you go into researching your programs and knowing the differences, figuring out your priorities and how each program meets them. As Liz has mentioned before, being extremely organized. Typically, I recommend, and this is for any type of program, applying for at least 3 programs, and typically 4 to 6 programs, just to give yourself options in terms of admissions and having the ability to choose the program that's right for you. So it's really important to be organized, and that's why it's important to start early. And following the directions. Every program is different. Every program has its own process and requirements. So even if you're applying to multiple graduate programs within the same university system, grad school admissions tend to be decentralized. So even programs under the umbrella of the same university may be different and may have different requirements. So a little more on entrance exams. We've kind of touched on this throughout. As I said, many are being waived now, but I do have a number of clients who are taking exams anyway to strengthen their application. So as Liz had mentioned before, if your GPA is lower, or if you're looking to demonstrate more quantitative prowess or abilities that may not be apparent in your resume or in your background, taking an entrance exam and doing well is a great way to bolster your credentials. And again, if my prediction for the fall is true and these exams aren't waived, this is why the last two bullets are really important. So preparation and allowing yourself enough time to retake if needed. So again, knowing that this applicant pool is going to be bigger and more competitive, if admissions committees have to split hairs when they're looking at candidates, they may use the test scores. In fact, they will use the test scores as one of the hairs they split. So it's really important to prepare and give yourself enough time to retake any particular exams if you need to.
Okay, great. So I think I jumped the gun here. So a couple of other components of your application that I just wanted to touch on. Transcripts. So you will need to order an official copy of your transcripts from each school that you've attended, each college or university that you've attended. And this would also include any dual enrollment work you may have done in high school. So I would also recommend ordering an unofficial copy for yourself, just so you'll have that handy. You'll know what the admissions offices are seeing, and sometimes you might need the information from the transcripts to fill out parts of the application. For the letters of recommendation, schools typically request 2 to 3, so it may depend on the program or even the specific school. And this can be handled differently. In some cases, the letters are sent directly to a credentialing service, or they may be sent directly to the school, but typically you won't see them. It's good to make sure that you're asking for the letters far enough in advance to give the recommenders time to prepare. So I would say at least a month in advance, or ideally longer if at all possible. And for academic references, if you're asking a faculty member, I would actually give them a little bit of extra time. And I would also make sure that you pad your deadline a little bit. So ask for it maybe a couple weeks earlier than you actually need them, just in case there's any delay. And then the personal statement is a very critical part of the application package. This is going to explain your interest in the program and the school, and indicates how you plan to use the degree. So this is your opportunity to discuss your short and long-term goals. Some programs are going to be looking for a very succinct and factual statement. So just kind of, why are you applying to school, and what are your long-term goals? Others might welcome more of a narrative format where you might be able to possibly tell a story that helps set the stage. So it's critically important to make sure that you're answering the prompt that was asked, and also to make sure that you're following all of the formatting instructions, because there could be word count limits or character limits or margin or font size requirements. So you want to make sure that you're taking all of those things into consideration and addressing them. So we do typically read and critique personal statements and essays as part of our advising services. And we recommend that you have at least one, if not more, people read them so they can give you feedback on content, style, and grammar, and look out for errors and so forth. So you do want to make sure that your statements are error-free and that they clearly describe your interest in the program and why you would be a strong candidate. Amanda?
Thanks. So the good news is you don't have to go through this process alone. We are here to help. As I prompted in the chat, don't forget to post your questions. We'll be doing Q&A in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to give a brief overview of how we do support all alumni throughout the grad school application process. So the #1 way we do this is through our career advising appointments. So We cover everything from your overall strategy for applying to grad school, helping to determine whether, you know, a certain program is right for you or not, helping you talk through your options. The most critical one, as Liz mentioned previously, is the essay and personal statement reviews. I feel like this is probably the most important work I do with my clients, because it is really easy to get in your own head when you're writing your essays. And so I really do encourage all of you who are writing your essays, have someone else look at it, even if it's not us. But that is what Liz and I spend a lot of our fall doing during application season, is reviewing essays and personal statements. We also provide resume and CV reviews, and you can request a meeting with us via your account in UV Alumni Jobs. You'll be able to see all of our availability and choose the appointment that is right for you.
Great, thank you. So we've compiled some resources for you to learn more about the services we offer if you need help with your application process, and also to help you explore how COVID-19 has impacted the graduate school exams and admissions process. So we've broken out law, MBA school, and medical schools separately. And then also we've provided some general information on the GRE and grad school applications in general. You can also search specifically by the school if you're beginning to develop your list of schools, or by the type of program if you want to get a clearer sense of what's happening in the programs that are of interest to you. Okay.
All right, so we are ready to take your questions. I'm seeing some come in the chat box already, so I thank you for that. We always want to answer as many questions as possible during these sessions. So I'm actually going to go in reverse chronological order and answer the question from Layla that asked, if you aren't a contributing member, you don't have access to Alumni Career Services or the career advising appointments. So that's not true. If you're a contributing member to the Alumni Association, you get unlimited access to us. So as many advising appointments as you can handle, you have access to us in an unlimited way for the rest of your life. If you're at a point where you're thinking, I really just need this help right now while I'm going through my grad school application process, we do sell a package of appointments. So you can purchase 5 appointments, and that typically should be enough to help you through the grad school application process. So we have a number of alumni who do that. They're just here to get help for their help with their application. And so they purchase a package, they use the 5 appointments for essay reviews and strategy conversations, and then they're done. So it's just a matter of what you prefer. So Liz, it looks like our first question that came in was about letters of recommendation. So Kat wanted to know, when asking for letters of recommendation, should we supply the recommender with the list of schools we're applying to? And in parentheses, will the recommender need to separately address or submit the letter to each school? It seems like a lot of work to ask them to do. So do you mind kind of giving an overview maybe of how that request process might look?
Yeah, it really depends on the program. Like we mentioned earlier, some programs use a credentialing service, in which case they would send one letter on your behalf to the credentialing service, and then it would be distributed to all of the schools. But other programs don't use those services. So it's really going to depend on the type of program that you're applying to. So that's just something that you should be able to research and determine. If it's faculty, this is part of what they do routinely. So they know that they're going to be writing letters of recommendation for students. So, they're prepared to do that. And if you're looking for a professional reference, they're probably going to be happy to write that for you as well.
And one thing I'll throw out too is a lot of faculty, well, I say a lot, that's a generic term, but there are a number of faculty who have a request process for recommendations posted somewhere on the university's website. So some have a form that you fill out when you want a recommendation from them. Some have a formal process, like you need to email them first and then have a conversation. So some faculty, because they are so used to writing recommendations, have a process that they want you to go through. So that's helpful in terms of having a path to follow. In terms of professional recommenders, again, as Liz mentioned, it just depends on the program. I can tell you for my particular program, my professional references basically sent it through a web form. And so that's how they handled it. So the second question is, what is your recommended approach for gaining the most financial aid possible? Any thoughts on that, Liz?
FAFSA.
Yeah.
So, like with undergrad, you want to apply for FAFSA, but for grad school, it's you and not your parents who is applying. There can also be privately funded or endowed sources of scholarships or grants available. Those are typically handled either through the school or through the department, and in some cases there may be national sources available, possibly through a foundation, or occasionally there might be something corporate that you might be able to apply for. It really does take a bit of detective work, because when you're comparing this across different schools, they're not always organized. The information is not always organized in the same way from one school to the next. So I would start with the department that you're applying to. Make sure that you're applying for FAFSA and in touch with the financial aid office, but the department may be able to suggest some other sources that you would apply for directly.
Yeah, and if you're going after scholarships, one thing to keep in mind is that there are a number of scholarships that do need your entrance exam score as part of the qualification process for that scholarship. So that's another reason to think about ignoring any sort of waiver for an entrance exam and just going ahead and taking it, because if you have that waived, you might be waiving the ability to apply for certain scholarships. Now, again, that's a broad statement. You have to research specific ones to see what the requirements are, but that's just another thing I'm throwing out there in terms of thinking about entrance exams as related to scholarships. Okay, so the next one is from Kimmery. I hope I said that right. How important is a GRE score if you have already earned an MA with a high GPA in both undergrad and your MA program?
I think it's just really going to depend. In some programs, the previous undergraduate performance and graduate performance may weigh more heavily. There are some programs that don't require, even before COVID, that were starting to not require a GRE. I think it's just really going to depend. And I know we're probably saying that a lot, but sometimes these kinds of requirements do vary according to not only program, but school within a type of program. So that's one of the details that we would encourage you to keep track of in that whatever organization system you're using, spreadsheet or whatever, because it can vary.
Right, and there are a number of programs that have standing entrance exam waivers. So for instance, if you have a lot of experience in a particular area, so and you're not worried about scholarship dollars or what have you that might be based on an entrance exam score, then they might waive that. You might be able to apply for a GRE or a GMAT or a whatever waiver outside of whether they're waiving it for COVID or not. So again, that's part of the research piece. And that's also, I forgot to say one of my tips previously, but that's why making friends with the admissions team at the programs you're interested in is really important. I would recommend having a conversation with an admissions counselor to answer these very specific types of questions, because they've got the inside info. They'll give you a realistic answer about what to expect and what they expect. And it gives you someone on the inside with whom you can keep in contact. So if you can establish that relationship with an admissions counselor in the programs that you're interested in, that can be really helpful as you're coming across these particular types of questions about particular programs.
And can I add something to anyone who has either been in the workforce for a couple of years or has extensive internship or student activity experience that's really substantive, you can make sure that that experience and your professional accomplishments are coming through strongly in your resume, because that can also be helpful. We didn't really mention that earlier, but one of the considerations that they may be looking at is your record of professional accomplishments, because that can also connect with your sense of purpose and the reason that you're pursuing the degree.
Yeah, it's a great point. So Hannah has asked, can you use repeat rec letters for different programs?
So the recommenders don't send the letters to you, they send them to the program. So I don't know that that would work. They're either sending them to a credentialing service or they're sending them directly to the school. So typically when you're applying and you're obtaining letters of recommendation, you waive the right to see them so they can make sure that they're giving a candid recommendation.
There may be a case where if, for instance, if you're applying to 3 or 4 different business school programs or law school programs and you are getting a professional or faculty recommendation, there may be a point in your conversation with them when you're asking for the recommendation to say, I'm applying to however many programs and I'd like to, you know, if you'd be willing to send your recommendation to these programs. So I think you can use it for different programs. It's just a matter of having that conversation with the recommender to see what their willingness is to, you know, if one program does it through a credentialing service and one doesn't, and you have to send one another method, just making sure, you know, touching base with your recommender and seeing if they're willing to do that. I wouldn't necessarily ask one recommender for, if you're going for like 6 or 7 programs, I don't know if I'd ask them to go through the, you know, machinations of having to do that for 6 or 7 programs. So you may want to have, you know, one recommender for 3 and one for another 3 or what have you. So I think the overall question is sure, but the more complicated answer is it depends on the submission process and what your recommender is willing to do. So let's see. Another question we have from Hannah is, which programs are currently temporarily waiving exams and extending deadlines or currently offering delayed admission? And so I'll jump right in with that. It depends. So this spring, it was a little bit of pandemonium, like not gonna lie. Things were changing, especially in the MBA world, things were changing by the day. More programs were waiving the GMAT or the GRE. I can say that law school admissions didn't really get affected because most law schools had informed their incoming class that they had been admitted before COVID and quarantine really hit. So this fall will be interesting to see what the law school applications process starts to look like. But again, it depends on the program you're going for. If you have a program that already has rolling admissions, then they most likely won't extend their deadline because they have rolling admissions. It really just depends on the program, what kind of program it is, school, what have you. But that's an excellent question for the admissions counselors with whom you speak when you start to nail down the different programs that you're interested in, and paying attention to the resources that Liz has pointed out, like ClearAdmit, Poets and Quants, LSAC, GMAC, the AAMC.org, the med school resource website. They're keeping track of all of this. They're all keeping track of what admissions looks like currently. So those are great resources depending on the type of program you're interested in. Liz, did you have anything else you wanted to throw in with that?
No, I think that was great. Just, yeah, and I know that we've said it depends a lot, but some of these answers really do just depend on not only the program, but the school itself. And yeah, those resources are great to keep track of. Poets and Quants has actually been kind of prolific. If you're interested in MBA school, they've been doing a really great job keeping track of all of the different changes and pushing them out through email notifications.
Right. So our next question is also from Hannah. Well, sorry, I lost track. Here we go. This is from Pamela. If we're now a few years outside of undergrad, what would you recommend we do for academic recommendations?
Yeah, the faculty are still accustomed to providing recommendations for students who have been out for a few years. So what I would do is send them a note and tell them when you had their class or classes. And, you know, if there was any contact that you had with them, you know, if you worked on a specific project, you know, I wrote the project about XYZ, or I did my thesis on, you know, this, that can be helpful in jogging their memory. I would also encourage you to send your resume with your professional accomplishments since then, and maybe just a brief paragraph about your goals for the grad school process and what you're hoping to accomplish. And that will help provide them with a refresher on, you know, what your undergraduate experience was with them, as well as some context for what you're planning to do with the degree and what you've accomplished since then.
Thanks, Liz. So we're getting a lot of recommendation letter questions, which is great, because actually that is an area that we tend to receive a lot of questions about when we're working with our clients. So Reed would like to know, is it common to request a recommendation from a teacher you haven't spoken to since undergrad, but had a good relationship at the time and did well in the class? I can say some of my clients have done that. It's just a matter of getting in touch with the faculty member and maybe a gentle reminder, you know, I was in your Econ 345 class and my final project was on X and I had a great time in your class, just to jog their memory a little bit. To reconnect. But Liz, what has your experience been with clients who might be in this situation?
Yeah, it's been the similar kind of experience. You know, I've suggested that they reach out with that bit of context. I've also encouraged clients to connect with them on LinkedIn. Sometimes, in fact, for those of you who are recent grads, if you had particularly strong relationships with some of your faculty or advisors, you might go ahead and consider doing that proactively, whether or not you plan to use them for recommendations down the line. And it's, you know, I think they really, especially those that have worked with you closely, do appreciate hearing from you and what you've been up to and what you've accomplished. So, you know, I think they're probably going to be happy to write that recommendation for you. But just that little bit of a reminder and an update is going to be helpful.
Yeah, agreed. So Carolyn has asked, if the GRE is optional, but you have already taken the test, what criteria should you consider before deciding to send it or not? Should you send it anyway, since it will be so competitive? I can say again, and I know everyone's going to hate me for saying this, but it depends. So if your GRE, if you have a fantastic GRE score, I think the answer is easy. Yes, I would send it anyway, because it's going to just bolster your credentials. If it's below what you were hoping to get, or if it's below the average GRE score or GMAT score or whatever that you see for the program. So almost every program is going to have statistics on what the average GMAT, average GPA, what have you, of their class looks like. If it's under that threshold, then I don't know if it's the best idea to submit it, unless you submit it and then let the person with whom you're in contact with in the admissions office, let them know that you're already planning to retake it. That's my thought, and that's admittedly more from the business school side of things. But Liz, what are your thoughts? If you're, you know, if you take the GRE anyway, even if it's waived, should you submit it anyway? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you that it depends, you know, how competitive the program is and what the rest of the applicant pool is likely to look at or look like would factor into the decision. You know, where do you feel your score falls within the pack? How strong is the rest of your application? So if there is an area in your application that's either, you know, okay, but not great, or is a weaker area, you do want to make sure that the rest of your application is as strong as possible. So I think you want to look at it in the context of your overall application and the applicant pool, and you know what is specifically happening at that particular school, and then decide. And you can always reach out to the admissions office if you're not sure.
Yeah, agreed. So our next question from Peyton is, do you have any tips for a grad program that requires portfolio pieces, So they're specifically referring to the VCU Brand Center. And I'll admit, I don't have experience with any clients who have applied to this particular program, so I can't really speak to it. I would think my general advice would be, again, talking to someone in admissions at that program to get an idea of what they're expecting in terms of what a portfolio should look like. I think this is also an opportunity to talk to maybe recent alums of the program to get an idea of what their portfolio looked like, or lessons learned from their application process. I always feel like in cases of specific programs, talking to people who are connected to it is way better than probably taking my more generic advice. Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And maybe even talking with some current students. You probably can find some either through LinkedIn, or the admissions office might even be able to put you in touch. If you reach out and say, I'd love to talk with a couple of current students, is there anybody that you might be able to put me in touch with? And you could ask about that part of the application process, but then if you have other questions too about the student experience, that could be helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So question from Katrina is, for those of us applying to grad school after a few years in the workforce, what kind of leadership activities should we be highlighting in our applications? What do you think, Liz?
Well, I think context is going to be key here. Depending on how you plan to use the degree and what kind of role you aspire to and what kind of career track you've been on, if you can show that that you have had leadership activities, maybe progressively responsible leadership roles. What kind of accomplishments have you garnered through those experiences? I think to some extent, the weight may depend on expectations in the field that you're going into. So for instance, in the context of MBA school, leadership experience is going to be critically important, and you want to show that progression. You want to show that you've held responsibility and that you have quantifiable accomplishments. And I'm sure Amanda probably can add something to that from her experience at Darden.
Sure. So I agree. Overall agree. And I think leadership can mean a lot of different things on an MBA application. So it could mean, are you a community leader? Have you done a lot of work in terms of working with the community or working with vulnerable populations or volunteering? Are you a leader with a nonprofit organization? It can be leadership professionally. Are you a mentor at work? Did you help launch a program for a specific population at work? Have you been promoted? You want to show that, of course. But as Liz said, context is really key. And I think the same can go for law school. If you've worked with a crisis hotline and you want to go into a specific type of law that works with, people who, may have mental health issues, or if you want to go into a specific type of environmental law and you've volunteered with, the Southern Environmental Law Center or something like that, those are things. That's all about connecting your background with what you're going after. So that's all part of that finding your purpose, right? And figuring out how your experience aligns with the themes that you're highlighting in the application. So I think leadership can look like a lot of different things. It's just a matter of making sure that you're clear about why you're including it or why you're mentioning it in an essay. So let's see. Kat has asked, do you have any advice for gauging your competitiveness for specific programs? There seems to be much less admissions data for grad school compared with undergrad.
Yeah, I think that the programs that offer the most resources for doing that are law and MBA school. With the LSAC website, they have a tool where you can determine the intersection of your GPA and your LSAT score. There's also the Boston College Law School locator, which is, I think, becoming a little bit dated now, but it can still give you an idea of where you're likely to be competitive. it is a little harder to tell in some of the other disciplines. Again, Poets and Quants has lots of data and ClearAdmit for MBA students. I would, see if you can find any kind of admissions data on the program website. They may have some specs from the last class that was admitted with median scores, median GPAs, and so forth. And the admissions office might be able to provide some of that for the previous year. And then if you have an idea of how many students they admit, you can sort of estimate, how competitive it is, how many applications did they get and how many students did they accept. And if there's a large number of applications and a very small class size, it's pretty competitive. So you want to make sure that your application is as strong as possible. So even if you don't have the exact data, you may be able to gauge roughly how competitive that program is. And there may also be rankings depending on the kind of program as well. So US News has rankings for different kinds of programs, and that's something you could also do some research into to see if the programs you're looking at offer rankings.
Yeah, I'll put a plug in for two things. One is almost every grad program has some sort of info session. So it may be online. If we can ever all leave our houses again, they'll be in person again. But that's exactly what those are for, is to get an idea of what the student population looks like currently, or what did the most recently admitted class, what did their statistics look like. That's an opportunity to ask these questions directly to someone who works in admissions. And then if you are looking, this is going to depend on the program. Again, this is more of an MBA thing, but for other programs, this may work as well. Check out the recruiting section of the program's website. So for instance, if they have a section called like for employers, if it's a degree program that works closely with employers in terms of, job career development, almost every program is going to put out an employment report because that's how they entice recruiters to come recruit from that program. And so typically an employment report is going to have the breakdown of the last two classes. There may be demographic data, there may be GRE, GMAT, whatever scores, the industries that they went into, the top recruiters who recruited that particular year. So if you can't get the statistics on the prospective student side, check out the employer section, because they might have more clear data, because that's what recruiters look for when they're figuring out what schools to recruit from. Okay, Brenna has asked, for our CV/resume, do you advise keeping it to one page, and how far back in our professional experience should we detail?
So if you're a recent graduate and you're preparing a resume as opposed to a CV, I would keep it to one page. Typically, once you would get beyond a one-page resume once you have closer to probably 10 years of experience. And some programs are going to have a limit on the length of the resume. So you may need to do some, if you have an extensive number of internships or leadership activities, you may need to choose the ones that best represent your capability for the program that you're applying for. If you're using an academic CV, then there's really no length limit for those. You just continue to add on to those as you gain experience, and they're intended to be longer. But the resume typically, if it were someone more experienced going back to school, possibly mid-career, then maybe a 2-page, but I would say try to keep it to 1 page for recent grads.
I'd agree with that. And in fact, some programs are very explicit. They only want 1 page from you. So then you have to be really strategic about what you're going to include and what you're going to leave out. So again, that's part of sort of paying attention to the application requirements for each program. But for programs that don't have a stated preference, I think, yeah, if you're a recent grad, I'd keep it to 1 page. If you're more mid-career, I'd usually typically say like maybe 5 to 7 years out. That's where I think you could keep it to 2 pages, especially if you do need to highlight like leadership experience, or you need to go into more depth a little bit around other sections that you don't typically go into on a regular resume, so it ends up kicking to 2 pages. I think that's fine. So, all right, well, that is the end of our questions. So thank you so much. These were great questions, and these are asked that we get all the time. So we've heard these a lot, so that's great. All right, Liz, do we have anything else we want to share before we wrap up today?
Yeah, so I just wanted to share our contact information. So if anybody would like to follow up with us or is interested in making an appointment, we've provided all of our contact information, and 2 of our colleagues are also sitting in on the webinar today. Angela Antonucci, who is our employer relations manager. She oversees UVA alumni jobs, which is our job posting system for alumni. And Eric Hunter, our colleague who manages the alumni professional networks. So we have 7 networks established for alumni who might want to connect with one another around shared professional interests. So we've included all of our contact info here. If you have a question and you're not sure which one of us it should be directed to, feel free to send an email to alumnicareers@virginia.edu. We all receive those emails, and then the appropriate staff member can respond back to you. And I've also included a link to our website. We're going to be sending a copy of the slides out to everyone who registered, so you'll get this presentation, and we'll have the link so you can navigate to all of these resources afterward.